Welcome to Life Turns, where every story takes you on a roller coaster of emotions and unexpected twists. Tonight, I want to share with you the most shocking night of my life, the night before my wedding. It was supposed to be filled with laughter, blessings, and prayers for my new beginning. But instead, it turned into a nightmare I will never forget. And trust me when I say, the next morning, it wasn't me who trembled, it was my parents. The day before my wedding started with so much joy. My friends decorated my room with flowers, my bridesmaids laughed while fixing my hair, and the whole house smelled of food and celebration. Everyone was busy preparing for the biggest day of my life, and I felt like the happiest bride in the world. I thought I was walking into a fairy tale. But what I didn't know was that my parents were planning something dark behind my back. Something so cruel that even now, my heart shakes remembering it. That evening, as the guests left and the house grew quieter, I noticed my parents acting strangely. My mother wouldn't look me in the eye. My father, who usually gave me blessings before I slept, simply walked past my room without a word. I thought maybe they were nervous, emotional about letting me go. After all, every parent feels heavy-hearted before their daughter's wedding. I had no idea that their silence was hiding a plan that would destroy me. Around midnight, I was sipping warm milk that my mother brought into my room. She smiled weakly and told me it would help me sleep peacefully. I trusted her, why wouldn't I? She was my mother. But the moment I drank it, something felt off. Within minutes, my head grew heavy, and my body refused to move. I remember trying to call out, but my voice cracked, and my eyes slowly shut against my will. That's when I realized too late, something was wrong with that drink. The next thing I remember is waking up to strange sensations around my head. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't my imagination. My mother was holding me down while my father shaved my long black hair, the hair I had taken care of since childhood, the hair I wanted to flaunt proudly on my wedding day. I tried to scream, I tried to fight, but my arms felt like they were made of stone. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but my parents didn't stop. My father's hand was steady, his face cold. My mother's lips trembled, but she didn't let go of me. In that moment, my heart shattered. I felt betrayed in a way I can't explain. Every strand that fell from my head felt like a piece of my soul was being stolen. I thought, why would my own parents do this? What did I do to deserve such cruelty? And the worst part was, I couldn't even stop them. I was trapped in my own body, forced to watch them strip away my identity, my beauty, my confidence. Hours later, when they finally left me, I sat on my bed, my head completely bald, my pillow wet with tears. I stared at the mirror, unable to recognize the girl staring back at me. The once joyful bride was now broken, humiliated, and scarred for life. The wedding I had dreamed about since childhood was gone. Or so I thought. But destiny had other plans, and my parents were about to face consequences they never imagined. When morning came, the house was buzzing with guests again. Laughter and music filled the air, but when people entered my room to greet the bride, silence swept over them like a storm. My best friend gasped, my cousins whispered, and soon the entire house was talking. Word spread quickly, the bride's head was shaved. The celebration turned into chaos. My parents tried to cover it up, but their faces grew pale. They trembled as the truth threatened to come out. At that moment, I made a choice. I could hide in shame and let my parents destroy me completely, or I could rise from the ashes and show everyone that my worth wasn't tied to my hair. I stood up, wrapped a scarf around my head, and walked into the hall. Every pair of eyes turned to me, waiting to see if I would break down. But instead, I lifted my chin and said, yes, my parents shaved my head. But tomorrow, I will still marry the man I love. And nothing they do can stop me. The crowd fell silent. My parents' faces turned white, their hands shook, and they finally realized the gravity of what they had done. But this was only the beginning. Because what happened next, on the actual wedding day, was something no one could have predicted. The sun rose on my wedding day, but instead of feeling blessed, my heart was heavy with humiliation. I sat quietly, staring at my reflection in the mirror, my bald head wrapped in a thin scarf. I wanted to cry again, but my tears had already dried through the night. My parents thought they had broken me, but deep inside, something stronger was rising. Something that whispered, they can take your hair, but they can't take your spirit. Soon, relatives began pouring into the house, women carrying trays of sweets, children running around in excitement, and men laughing loudly in the courtyard. But as soon as they entered my room, their laughter died. My best friend gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. My cousins looked at each other in confusion. Then whispers started to spread like wildfire. What happened to the bride? Why is her head shaved? Who could do this? Every passing second made the air heavier, and I could feel the shame pressing against my chest. My mother rushed into the room, trying to hush everyone. She kept saying, she wanted it this way, it's a ritual, it's symbolic. But no one bought her lies. I saw her hands shaking, her eyes darting nervously. My father avoided everyone's eyes, his voice silent, his shoulders stiff. The very people who had always carried themselves with authority were now trembling. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, not mine. Then came the moment I feared most. My groom, Daniel, arrived with his family. He walked into the house smiling, ready to meet his bride. But when his eyes landed on me, I held my breath. Would he reject me? Would he feel disgusted? Would he walk away and leave me broken forever? He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly walked closer. The room grew silent as everyone waited for his reaction. My scarf slipped slightly, revealing more of my bald head. My heart pounded like a drum. But then Daniel did something that shocked everyone. He reached out, gently took my hand, and whispered, "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Those words broke the dam I had been holding back. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not from pain this time, but from relief. In that moment, I knew I had chosen the right man. My parents might have tried to ruin me, but Daniel's love stood like a shield around me. Of course, not everyone was so kind. Some relatives shook their heads, whispering that a bald bride was a curse, a bad omen. Some even suggested postponing the wedding. But Daniel silenced them by standing proudly beside me and declaring, "Her strength is her beauty, and I will marry her exactly as she is." His words spread like fire through the hall, and slowly, the whispers turned into claps. People began admiring my courage instead of mocking my looks. As the ceremony began, my parents grew smaller and smaller in the background. Their faces turned pale, their hands clenched tightly together. They avoided the stares of the guests, but it was impossible to hide their guilt. They knew the truth was on the verge of spilling out. People were suspicious, asking questions, and I could see their fear growing with every moment. During the vows, I looked at my parents. For a second, I wanted to scream at them, expose them, tell the whole world what they had done. But instead, I chose silence, not because I wanted to protect them, but because I knew life itself would deliver their punishment. And indeed, it did, sooner than I expected. As we walked out after the ceremony, Daniel holding my hand tightly, an older aunt cornered my mother. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "No bride shaves her head willingly. Did you do this to her?" My mother stuttered, her lips trembling, sweat gathering on her forehead. My father tried to intervene, but his voice cracked. Their silence was enough to confirm the truth. Soon, whispers turned into accusations, and people began confronting them openly. "You humiliated your own daughter," one guest shouted. "What kind of parents do this?" another asked. "This is cruelty, not tradition," someone else cried out. My parents were cornered, trembling under the weight of judgment. I watched from afar as their pride crumbled, their authority destroyed. They had drugged me, shaved me, and tried to break me, but instead, they ended up exposing themselves in front of the entire family and community. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful, not because I wanted revenge, but because I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. They had lost the right to call themselves my protectors. And the trembling in their hands was proof that deep down, they knew they had lost me forever. But the story doesn't end there. Because later that evening, after the celebrations calmed down, Daniel and I made a decision that would change everything for my parents, and for me. That night, after the wedding ceremony ended and most of the guests had gone, the house grew quiet again. But this silence was nothing like the one before my parents' betrayal. This time, it was heavy, awkward, and filled with shame. My parents sat alone in their room, while Daniel and I entered the small space prepared for us as husband and wife. My head was still bald under my scarf, but for the first time, I didn't feel weak. Instead, I felt stronger than ever, because I realized something powerful. I had survived the worst night of my life, and I had risen above it. Daniel looked at me, his eyes soft and filled with pride. He said, "You don't have to explain anything. I know your parents hurt you, but I promise you'll never face anything like that again." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. For the first time in months, I felt safe. But deep inside, I also knew that this chapter wasn't over. My parents had crossed a line so deep that I could never forget it, and I couldn't let them escape without facing the truth. The next morning, we invited a few close relatives and elders to gather in the living room. My parents tried to act normal, but their eyes couldn't hide the fear that was eating them alive. They must have thought that now the wedding was done, everything would settle down, and people would eventually forget. But they were wrong. Because I stood up, removed my scarf in front of everyone, and revealed my bald head proudly. Gasps filled the room again, but this time I spoke before anyone else could. I didn't shave my head willingly. I was drugged by my own parents. They did this to me the night before my wedding. My voice was steady, though my hands shook. They wanted to humiliate me, to break me. But they failed. The room exploded with outrage. My relatives looked at my parents with disbelief. Some shouted, some cried, some couldn't even find the words. My parents sat frozen, trembling, their faces drained of color. My father tried to speak, but his voice cracked. My mother broke down in tears, repeating, "We did it to protect you, to stop you." But the excuses only made it worse. "Protect me?" I shouted. "You stole my choice. You destroyed my dignity. You tried to ruin my happiness because you couldn't control me anymore." My voice echoed through the room, and for the first time, my parents had no power. They sat small and broken, shivering under the weight of their own guilt. The truth was finally out, and instead of being the ones who shamed me, they became the ones who were shamed. People looked at them not as parents but as cruel strangers. Their reputation, their pride, their so-called honor, it all crumbled in a single moment. After the confrontation, Daniel and I left their house. We didn't look back. And as we walked away hand in hand, I felt a strange peace. My parents had betrayed me in the worst way, but instead of destroying me, they had only made me stronger. They had tried to make me tremble in fear, but in the end, it was they who trembled under the weight of their own actions. Life with Daniel was not always easy. People still whispered about the bald bride, and sometimes I felt the sting of those words. But each time I saw Daniel's love-filled eyes, I remembered that beauty isn't in hair or appearances, it's in courage, strength, and the ability to rise after being torn down. My parents had taken away my hair, but they had given me something they never intended, the power to stand tall on my own. Months later, I learned through relatives that my parents hardly spoke to anyone anymore. They lived in silence, their shame following them everywhere. People didn't respect them the way they used to, and slowly, they realized what they had lost. They hadn't just lost a daughter, they had lost their honor, their pride, and their peace of mind. And all of it because they let their control and fear drive them into cruelty.